Dr. Yunhana felt the cold metal floor through her worn boots as she stepped into New Geneva Spaceport, the massive terminal stretch before her like a metal cathedral. Its gleaming walls reaching up into darkness, holographic advertisements floated in the air, advertising luxury cruises to distant star systems in languages she couldn't read. Her jumpsuit was faded gray, stained with the red dust of Kepler 440b. 3 months on that mining world had left its mark on everything she owned. The jacket she wore over her shoulders was patched into places, and her boots had seen better days. She looked exactly like what she was, someone who had just returned from hard work in a dangerous place. The Veilfren station attendants noticed her immediately. These tall, blue-skinned beings with their crystalline eyes that sparkled like diamonds were known throughout the galaxy for their obsession with appearances. They wore pristine white uniforms that probably cost more than most humans made in a year. Velta, the head attendant, stood nearly 7 feet tall. His crystalline eyes swept over Hannah's modest appearance with the kind of look someone gives to something unpleasant they found on their shoe. His 3 colleagues gathered behind him, their expressions matching his disgust. Another human worker. Velta sneered, his voice carrying that typical Veilfren accent that made every word sound like he was speaking down to you. Third-class transport is that way. He pointed a long blue finger toward the crowded shuttle bay where dozens of tired-looking beings waited in long lines. The shuttle bay was chaos. Alien workers from a dozen different species pushed and shoved, trying to get seats on the cheapest transports. The air smell of unwashed bodies and desperation, steam hiss from broken pipes. And the lighting flickered constantly. Hannah walked calmly toward the main desk, her footsteps steady despite the hostile stares following her. The desk itself was a marvel of alien technology, a floating crystal platform that hummed with energy. Behind it, holographic displays showed departure times for luxury cruisers bound for the most exclusive worlds in the galaxy. I need to check in for diplomatic transport, Hannah said quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence that had fallen round the desk. The attendants burst into laughter. It wasn't polite laughter. It was the cruel kind that cut through the air like a blade. Other passengers turned to watch the spectacle, a group of reptilian saurians. Their scales gleaming under the terminal lights hissed their amusement. Their forked tongues flaked out to taste the air, sensing the drama unfolding. Several insectoid Clixians clicked their mandibles together in what passed for laughter among their species. Their compound eyes reflected the terminal lights like disco balls, and their antennae twitched with excitement. They loved a good show, especially when it involved someone else's humiliation. Velta's crystalline eyes gleamed with cruel amusement. Diplomatic transport. He looked at his colleagues, who were still chuckling. Humans and their delusions. Do you know what diplomatic transport costs? Do you know who uses diplomatic transport? More aliens gathered round now, a family of Arcturians, their grey skin marked with intricate tattoos, whispered among themselves. Even some human passengers looked embarrassed, as if Hannah's presence somehow reflected poorly on their entire species. Look at her, Velta continued, his voice getting louder. Dressed like she just crawled out of a mine shaft, probably can't even afford a basic transport ticket, let alone diplomatic passage. The crowd murmured agreement. Someone in the back shouted, "Send her back to Earth where she belongs." Velta raised his hand for silence. "Security," he called out, his voice echoing through the terminal. Two massive Brontic guards lumbered over, their footsteps shaking the floor. These were the kind of beings that nightmares were made of. 8 feet tall, with grey skin that looked like stone, and scars crisscrossing their bodies from countless battles. Their eyes glowed red in the terminal lighting, and when they breathed, steam came out of their nostrils. Problem here. One rumbled, his voice like grinding rocks. This human thinks she's important. Velter explained, still chuckling. She wants diplomatic transport. Can you believe it? Escort her to the proper terminals before she embarrasses herself further. The crowd pressed closer, some already pulling out recording devices. This was going to be entertainment they could share with friends back home. Another delusional human getting put in their place. Hannah remained perfectly calm throughout the entire ordeal. Her dark eyes betrayed nothing. No anger, no fear, no embarrassment. She simply stood there like a rock in a storm, letting the mockery wash over her without effect. I understand, she said quietly. May I make one communication call first? The Brontic guard grunted. Make it quick, as Hannah reached for her communicator. The crowd settled in to watch the final act of this human's humiliation. They had no idea that everything was about to change. As Hannah's fingers moved across her communicator, Velter's voice boomed through the terminal like he was performing for an audience. And in many ways, the crowd had grown larger, with aliens from every corner of the galaxy gathering to witness what they thought would be a human spectacular downfall. You see, everyone, Velter announced, spreading his arms wide like a showman. This is exactly why humans don't belong in civilized space. Look at her, dressed like a common laborer who just crawled out of a mine shaft. She probably can't even afford a basic transport ticket, let alone diplomatic passage. The gathered aliens murmured their agreement like a choir of cruelty. Their various languages mixed together into a symphony of mockery. Some clicked, others hissed, and a few made sounds that no human throat could produce. The saurian merchant, his scales gleaming with expensive bio-oils, slithered forward. His forked tongue flicked out as he spoke. Typical human arrogance. They think finding a few habitable worlds makes them equal to civilizations that have been traveling the stars for millennia. Exactly, shouted an Arcturian trader. His gray, skin marked with tattoos that showed his merchant rank. Humans have been in space for what? 200 years. We've been building empires while they were still hitting rocks together. The crowd laughed at this, and more aliens pushed forward to get a better view. A family of Zentaurians, their purple skin shimmering under the terminal lights, lifted their children onto their shoulders so they could see better. Even the younglings wanted to watch the human get humiliated. Silence her communicator, Velter ordered, his crystalline eyes flashing with authority. We don't need her calling her little human friends to complain to whatever pathetic embassy handles their affairs. But Hannah had already finished her call. The brief conversation had lasted less than 30 seconds. She pocketed the device with the same calm movements she'd shown throughout this entire ordeal and waited quietly as the mockery continued round her. Did you hear that? Cackled a Clixian trader, his compound eyes glittering with malicious joy. She actually tried to call for help, probably calling her supervisor at whatever mining company she works for. The two Brontic gods stepped closer, their massive forms casting shadows over Hannah. Their breathing was heavy, like steam engines, and their red eyes glowed in the terminal lighting. One of them cracked his knuckles, and the sound was like breaking stone. Strip search her, Velter commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. These human diplomats are usually smugglers anyway. They hide contraband in their clothing and think they can fool civilized beings. The crowd of aliens pressed closer, eager to witness what they believed would be the human's final humiliation. Some were already recording with their devices, their various technologies capturing the scene from different angles. Holographic displays flickered to life as beings live-streamed the event to friends and family. Across the galaxy, this will make excellent entertainment back home, laughed a Clixian merchant, his mandibles clicking with glee. Delusional human gets reality check. My nestmates will love this. Save it to the galactic network, suggested a Velthran clerk, file it under human stupidity for future reference. Even some of the human passengers in the terminal looked away in embarrassment, if you tried to. Distance themselves, clearly, not wanting to be associated with what was happening. One human businessman actually moved to a different waiting area entirely. The atmosphere in the terminal had become electric with anticipation. Aliens who had been minding their own business now gathered round like spectators at a gladiator match. The air buzzed with excitement and cruelty. Hannah stood perfectly still as the guards approached, their massive hands reaching toward her. Her expression remained serene, almost meditative. She looked like someone who was somewhere else entirely, as if her mind had traveled to a peaceful place while her body remained in this chaos. "Look at her," sneered Velta. "She's not even going to fight back. Typical human. All talk, no action." The first Brontic guard reached for Hannah's jacket. His scarred fingers just inches from the worn fabric. The crowd held its breath, recording. Devices focused on the moment of triumph. That's when the spaceport's emergency lighting began flashing. The sudden strobing red lights cut through the terminal like lightning. An automated voice echoed through the massive space, speaking in galactic standard. "Attention all personnel. Priority diplomatic vessel approaching. All non-essential activities must cease immediately." The crowd looked round in confusion. Priority diplomatic vessels were reserved for the most important beings in the galaxy, planetary leaders, galactic council members, and other figures of immense power. The emergency lights continued flashing, and the terminal's main display screens flickered to life, showing the approach of a massive ship. Even through the grainy sensor feed, it was clear that this was no ordinary vessel. Velta's crystalline eyes widened as he stared at the displays. His confident smirk began to fade as the reality of the situation slowly dawned on him. The massive viewports that stretched across the terminal's outer wall suddenly darkened as an enormous shadow passed overhead. Every being in the spaceport looked up in awe as the shadow grew larger and larger, blocking out the artificial suns of the space station. Then they saw it. The Aegis Prime descended like a dark angel from the stars. This wasn't just any ship. This was humanity's flagship diplomatic cruiser, a vessel that most beings had only seen in holographic news broadcasts. The ship was absolutely massive. Easily 3 times the size of the luxury cruisers that normally used the VIP landing pads. Its hull was sleek black metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. But embedded throughout the surface were thousands of energy conduits that pulsed with brilliant blue light, like veins of electricity running through the ship's skin. The pattern was hypnotic, almost alive, and it cast dancing shadows across the terminal floor. The ship settled onto the VIP landing pad with perfect precision. There was no sound of struggling engines, no grinding of metal against metal. The landing was so smooth it seemed to defy physics. The Aegis Prime simply appeared to float down and kiss the landing pad with the gentleness of a falling leaf. The spaceport fell completely silent. Even the background hum of machinery seemed to quiet in reverence, as if the station itself was holding its breath. The constant chatter of aliens, the beeping of transport schedules, the hiss of atmospheric processes, everything stopped. The ship's AI spoke, and its voice filled every corner of the terminal through speakers that most beings didn't even know existed. The voice was clear, precise, and spoke in perfect galactic standard without even a hint of accent. "New Geneva Spaceport. This is the Terran vessel Aegis Prime. We are here to collect Ambassador Yoon Hannah, Chief Architect of the Terran Colonial Initiative." The words hit the crowd like a physical force. Ambassador, Chief Architect, Terran Colonial Initiative. These weren't just impressive titles. They were legendary ones. Every being in the galaxy knew about the Terran Colonial Initiative. It was the project that had turned humanity from a single-planet species into a galactic power-in. Less than 50 years. Velta S. crystalline eyes widened in absolute horror. The communicator in his hand began to shake so violently that it nearly fell to the floor. His perfect blue skin had gone pale, almost white, and his breath came in short gasps. "No," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "No, this can't be happening." The massive bay doors of the Aegis Prime opened with a sound like thunder. Steam hissed out from the ship's interior, creating dramatic clouds that rolled across the landing pad. Through the mist, figures began to emerge. 12 figures in gleaming power armor marched out in perfect formation. Their armor wasn't just protection, it was a statement. Each suit was a masterpiece of human engineering, covered in sensors and weapon systems that most alien militaries could only dream of. The armor hummed with energy, and blue lights traced patterns across the surface that matched the ship's hull. The sound of their synchronized footsteps echoed through the terminal like a war drum. Each step was perfectly timed, perfectly placed. They moved like a single organism, a display of discipline and coordination that made even the Brontic guards look clumsy by comparison. Their leader was a stern-faced woman with lieutenant's stripes clearly visible on her shoulder. Her helmet was retracted, revealing short black hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She walked with the confidence of someone who had faced death and wasn't impressed by it. "I am Lieutenant Kim Soar of the Terran Diplomatic Guard," she announced, her voice carrying through the Narsaland spaceport without any need for amplification. "We are here for Ambassador Yoon," behind her. The other guards took defensive positions with movements so fluid they seemed choreographed. Their armor hummed with energy, and their weapons, though holstered, were clearly visible. Each weapon was a work of art, crafted from materials that gleamed like liquid metal. The crowd of aliens that had been so eager to watch Hannah's humiliation now pressed backward, trying to get as far away as possible. The Saurians who had been hissing insults were now silent, their forked tongues hidden. The Clixians who had been clicking with laughter now stood frozen, their compound eyes reflecting the terror they felt. Even the massive Brontic guards, who had been so confident moments before, now looked uncertain. Their red eyes darted between the human soldiers and their own hands, as if they were trying to decide whether they could outrun energy weapons. All eyes turned to Hannah, who straightened her worn jacket with the same calm movements she had shown throughout this entire ordeal. She walked toward her escort with steady steps, her boots clicking against the metal floor in the profound silence as she approached Lieutenant Kim. The crowd could see something they had missed before. Despite her worn clothing and dusty appearance, Hannah moved with the grace of someone accustomed to command. Her posture was perfect, her steps measured, and her expression carried the quiet authority of someone who had shaped the fate of worlds. The woman they had been mocking wasn't just any human. She was one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and she had been standing among them the entire time. As Hannah approached her guards, Lieutenant Kim Sora stepped forward with the crisp precision of a military professional. Her voice carried clearly through the terminal, loud enough for every being present to hear every word. "Ambassador, we apologize for the delay. The Kepler mining survey took longer than expected." The casual way she said "Ambassador" sent shock waves through the crowd. This wasn't some mistake or misunderstanding. This was real. The woman they had been mocking was actually one of the most important humans in the galaxy. "No problem, Sora," Hannah replied with the same calm tone she had maintained throughout her ordeal. "The extremophile samples we collected will revolutionize terraforming. The data alone is worth the inconvenience." The crowd of aliens exchanged shocked glances. Extremophile research was cutting-edge science that only the most advanced civilizations had mastered. These were organisms that could survive in conditions that would kill almost any other form of life. In boiling acid, in the vacuum of space, in temperatures that would melt metal, as an Turian scientist in the crowd gasped audibly. Extremophiles. But that's impossible. Only 3 species in the galaxy have successfully isolated and studied those organisms for species, corrected an Arcturian researcher. His tattoos glowing with excitement. Humans just made it for. Welter stepped forward, his legs shaking so badly he could barely walk. His crystalline eyes were wide with terror, and his voice came out as barely a whisper. Ambassador, we didn't know. Of course you didn't, Hannah said simply, turning to face him with the same serene expression she had worn throughout. His abuse, you judged by appearances rather than credentials. She turned to address the entire crowd, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded respect across star systems. The clothing I'm wearing, it's not just any jumpsuit. It's a biocontainment suit designed for extreme environments. Every thread is woven with nanofibers that can withstand temperatures from absolute 0 to over 3,000 degrees. The crowd pressed closer, hanging on her every word. Even the beings who had been recording her humiliation were now recording her revelation. The dust on my jacket that you found so amusing. Hannah continued, brushing at one of the red stains on her sleeve. These are samples from organisms that can survive in conditions that would kill most known species. One speck of this dust contains more scientific value than most beings see in their entire lives. A holographic display suddenly activated above them, projecting from Lieutenant Kim's armor. The display showed a detailed credential file that made several aliens step backward in awe. Dr. Yoon Hannah, Chief Xenobiologist of the Terran Science Council, architect of the Kepler terraforming project, holder of 17 advanced degrees from universities across 3 star systems, author over 200 scientific papers, winner of the Galactic Science Prize for 3 consecutive years. But the most impressive credential was at the bottom of the list, chief architect of the Terran Colonial Initiative. The project that had established human colonies on over 50 worlds in less than 50 years. Impossible, breathed a Saurian merchant. The Terran Colonial Initiative was designed by a team of hundreds of scientists. The team reported to me. Hannah said simply, I designed the framework that made it all possible. The mining colony I just visited, Hannah continued, was evaluating humanity's proposal to help terraform 3 dead worlds in Veilthran space, worlds that your people wrote off as uninhabitable. The Veilthran attendants looked like they were going to be sick. Their perfect blue skin had gone pale, and Welter was swaying on his feet as if he might faint. Everyone in the galaxy knew about those 3 dead worlds. They orbited Veilthara Prime, the Veilthran homeworld. But they were lifeless rocks with poisonous atmospheres. The Veilthran government had spent billions trying to make them habitable. But every attempt had failed. Their homeworld was desperately overpopulated, and those dead worlds represented their species' only hope for expansion. You mean, Welter whispered, his voice cracking, you can actually terraform those worlds. The organisms I collected from Kepler-440 can survive in methane atmospheres, Hannah explained. They can actually process toxic gases and convert them into breathable air. With the right engineering, we could have your 3 worlds ready for colonization within 10 years. The implications hit the crowd like a physical blow. The Veilthran species was facing extinction from overpopulation. Their birth rate was declining because there simply wasn't enough space for new generations. These 3 worlds could save their entire civilization. But that's not all. Hannah continued, the extremophile research has applications for dozens of other species. The Xentorians need help with their ice worlds. The Arcturians want to expand into high radiation systems. The Clixians are looking for worlds with methane oceans. Each species she mentioned had representatives in the crowd, and they all looked stunned. These were problems that had plagued their civilizations for generations, and this human woman was casually mentioning solutions like she was discussing the weather. The Terran Colonial Initiative isn't just about human expansion, Hannah said, her voice carrying across the silent terminal. It's about helping all species find new homes among the stars. We believe the galaxy is big enough for everyone. The crowd stood in absolute silence, trying to process what they had just learned. The woman they had been mocking wasn't just important. She was someone who could literally save entire civilizations. And they had just spent the last hour humiliating her in front of hundreds of witnesses. As Hannah walked toward the Aegis Prime, her boots clicking against the metal floor in the profound silence of the terminal, she paused and turned back to face Velta. The Veilfran attendant stood frozen, his crystalline eyes wide with terror as he waited for what he was certain would be his doom. Despite this misunderstanding, Hannah said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent spaceport, I won't be filing a formal complaint with the Galactic Council. The relief that washed over Velta's face was visible to everyone watching. His shoulders sagged, and for a moment it looked like he might collapse entirely. The formal complaint process with the Galactic Council could destroy careers, ruin reputations, and end diplomatic relationships between entire species. However, Hannah continued, and that single word made every alien in the terminal hold their breath. I will be recommending that the Terraforming Council reconsider which species are ready for advanced collaboration. Perhaps we should work with civilizations that judge others by their actions rather than their appearance. The implications hit the crowd like a physical blow that knocked the wind out of them. The Terraforming Council wasn't just another bureaucratic organization. It was the most powerful scientific body in the galaxy. They controlled access to habitable worlds, terraforming technology, and the resources that determined which species would thrive and which would struggle for survival. Being excluded from Terraforming Council programs would be catastrophic for dozens of species. The Veilfrans needed new worlds desperately. The Zentaurians were running out of ice worlds to colonize. The Arcturians were facing resource shortages that threatened their entire civilization. Ambassador, please, Velta pleaded, his voice cracking with desperation. He took a step forward, his hands clasped in front of him like he was praying. We made a mistake, a terrible, terrible mistake. Other aliens in the crowd began to murmur agreements. The Saurian merchant who had called humans arrogant now looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. The Clixians who had been clicking with laughter were now silent, their compound eyes reflecting genuine fear. Please don't punish our entire species for the actions of a few, begged an Arcturian trader. We are not all like this. My family depends on terraforming contracts, whispered a Zentaurian engineer. If the humans withdraw their support. Hannah studied Velta for a long moment, her dark eyes seeming to look right through him. The entire terminal waited in silence, hanging on her next words like their lives depended on it. And for many of them, their lives actually did depend on it. The organisms I discovered on Kepler 4 to be, she said finally, can survive in methane atmospheres. They're perfect for a terraforming Veilthara 3, your dead sister world. The project could begin within 6 months and have the atmosphere breathable within 10 years. Velta's eyes widened. Veilthara 3 was the closest of the 3 dead worlds to their home world. If it could be terraformed successfully, it would relieve the population pressure that was slowly strangling their civilization, I suppose. Hannah continued, everyone deserves a second chance. The relief in Velta's eyes was so profound that tears began to flow down his blue cheeks. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you, Ambassador. We will never forget this kindness. As Hannah turned and walked toward the Aegis Prime, the crowd of aliens watched in awe. The human who had appeared so unremarkable just an hour ago had just offered them salvation. She had the power to destroy their civilizations, and instead she had chosen to save them. Lieutenant Kim and her guards formed a protective formation round Hannah as they approached the ship. The other guards maintained their positions until their ambassador was safely aboard. Then they followed in perfect order. The Aegis Prime began its departure sequence, and the sound of its engines warming up filled the terminal. The blue energy conduits along the hull pulsed brighter, and the ship began to lift off with the same perfect precision it had shown during landing. As the massive vessel rose through the atmosphere, its engines cast brilliant blue light across the spaceport. The assembled aliens watched through the viewports as the ship grew smaller and smaller, until it was just another star in the darkness of space. Inside the ship, Lieutenant Kim smiled as they entered hyperspace. The stars outside the viewports stretched into brilliant lines as the Aegis Prime jumped to faster-than-light speed. Another successful diplomatic mission, Ambassador. Shearst. Hannah chuckled, finally removing her worn jacket to reveal the sophisticated biosuit beneath. The suit was a marvel of human engineering, covered in sensors and life support systems that had kept her alive in the hostile environment of Kepler-4b. Sometimes the best diplomacy is simply being yourself, Sora, she said. Let them underestimate humanity. It makes our achievements all the more impressive through the viewports. The stars streaked past as the Aegis Prime carried its precious cargo toward the next world that would benefit from human ingenuity and compassion. In the ship's laboratory, the extremophile samples from Kepler-4 to be weighted in specialized containment units, ready to revolutionize terraforming across the galaxy. Back in the spaceport, Velter was already composing his report to the Veilthrone High Council. His fingers shook as he typed the words that would change his species' relationship with humanity forever. Recommend immediate improvement in human relations. He wrote, their capabilities far exceed initial assessments. The human known as Ambassador Yunhana has offered to terraform Veilther 3 despite our poor treatment of her. Humans appear to value mercy and second chances above revenge. This species may be the key to our survival. He paused, looking up at the viewports where the Aegis Prime had disappeared into the stars. Then he added one final line. Never judge a human by their appearance. Their greatest strength lies not in their technology, but in their capacity for forgiveness. The end.